When my daughter-in-law laughed, "You live here for free?" I just smiled, took half a step back, and turned the key from the inside. Nobody was leaving this house until I was finished. No one knew that free around here had a price so high they couldn't afford it. And tonight, every last one of their secrets would be unlocked my way. My name is Sylvia Corbin. I am 62 years old, and I live on Linden Street, in the bungalow David and I rebuilt with our own hands. We bought it when the floors sagged and the paint was peeling in sheets, and we poured 20 years of our lives into making it solid. David has been gone for 5 years, but the house remains. It is my foundation, my history, the sum of my adult life. This is Briarford. It is a quiet town, until the silence breaks. My son, Marcus, rarely visits, maybe once a year, usually when the holidays make it an unavoidable obligation. Today was not a holiday. I saw his grey sedan pull up, the tyres crunching the gravel I'd raked just that morning. He got out, but he waited, instinctively, for his wife, Tessa, to emerge first. Tessa Lang Corbin. She stepped onto my porch like she was evaluating property she already owned, all sharp angles in an expensive wool coat that was too warm for the season. Her perfume hit me before she even reached the door, something cold and metallic that always smelled like disapproval. "Mother," Marcus said. He never calls me Mom anymore. He leaned in and kissed the air half an inch from my cheek. "Sylvia," Tessa said. A short, sharp nod. She handed me a white bakery box tied with a precise string. "We brought scones from that new place." "How thoughtful," I said. I led them into the kitchen. This kitchen is where David and I argued over tile patterns and celebrated the day we paid off the mortgage. It smells like lemon oil and old wood. With them in it, the room suddenly felt small, and the air chilled by several degrees. I put the kettle on. The only sounds were the scrape of the chairs as they sat at the oak table, the click of the gas burner igniting, and the heavy, deliberate tick of the regulator clock on the wall. Tick. Tock. It felt like the clock was slowing down time, stretching the silence until it was thin and brittle. I placed 3 mugs on the table. The clink of the heavy ceramic against the wood was too loud. "So?" Marcus started. He stirred sugar into his tea before it had even steeped. A nervous, rattling sound. "How are things?" "Things are fine, Marcus. The roof is solid. The garden is tidy." Tessa set her mug down without drinking. Her manicured nails tapped once on the rim. "We were just looking over some of our own finances," she said, her voice smooth but edged, like cut glass. "It made us think about you, about this place." I waited. I am very good at waiting. "You know," she continued, "property taxes keep going up in Briarford, and the insurance on a house this old must be significant." Marcus jumped in, right on cue. "We were just wondering where you keep all the important papers. For the house, you know, the deed, the insurance policies, just in case." "In case of what?" "Anything. Mother," Marcus said. His eyes found a sudden, deep interest in the salt shaker. He would not look at me. He was letting her do the talking, just as he always did. His spine, it seemed, had dissolved years ago. "We just want to make sure you're organized," Tessa added, picking up his weak thread. "That everything is in one place. We worry about you being alone here." They hadn't driven 2 hours and brought stale scones because they were worried. The smell of her perfume was starting to give me a headache. I looked from my son's averted gaze to my daughter-in-law's polished, expectant face. I did not answer their question. Instead, I asked one of my own. My voice was quiet, but it cut right through the ticking of the clock. What do you two need from my house? A flicker in Tessa's eyes. Annoyance. But she covered it instantly with that thin, bright smile. Oh, Sylvia? We don't need anything. We're just concerned. We want to help. She leaned forward, dropping her voice into a confidential, patronizing whisper, as if she were sharing a kindness. After all, she said, her smile widening just slightly. At this age, living free is good, right? Living free. The words hung in the air, thick and oily. She said it as if I were a charity case, a vagrant they'd allowed to sleep on the sofa. As if the last 40 years of my life, the equity paid in sweat and loss and mortgage checks cleared long ago, amounted to nothing more than a handout. I looked down at my tea, at the dark reflection of the ceiling beams on the surface, very slowly. I set the mug down on the oak table. I did not slam it, but the heavy ceramic made contact with the wood with just enough force to send a small, sharp vibration through the grain, rattling the spoon Marcus had left in his saucer. The sound was definitive. It was the sound of a boundary, my boundary, being crossed. Tessa's smile wavered, just for a second. She had felt it, too. That comment about living free didn't just fade away. It hung in the kitchen air, a sour residue. After they left, the silence in the house felt different, heavier. The ticking clock on the wall no longer sounded steady. It sounded like a warning. That visit was only the beginning. It was the loosening of the soil before the real digging began. Marcus started helping. A few weeks after the scone incident, he showed up alone, all feigned concern. Mother, you should not be climbing ladders. Let me organize that high cupboard. Let me help you with that filing cabinet in the hall. His help felt like a search. I watched him from the doorway as he went through my files. His fingers, which I remembered being stained with grass and paint as a boy, were now pale and quick, sliding past the utility bills and the appliance warranties. He was not organizing. He was rummaging. He was looking for the papers they had asked about. His movements clumsy, but his intent sharp. Just neatening up, he muttered, his back to me. Be careful with the folders. Marcus, I said. Some of them are very old. He stiffened, but he didn't stop. He pulled out the drawer marked H, house, household, history. He left 2 hours later, claiming he had sorted the insurance papers for me. Then, Tessa brought the advisor. She didn't call first. She simply arrived one Tuesday, and she wasn't alone. Sylvia, this is Dane Calder, she announced, steering a man in a pinstriped suit into my living room. The suit was too expensive for Briarford. Mr. Calder is a family advisor, Tessa said, emphasizing the word family. Dane Calder was not a lawyer. His business card was thick, cream-coloured, and said only, asset strategist. He spoke in soft, reassuring tones about risk planning and legacy protection. He made my home, the one David and I built, sound like a crumbling liability. We were thinking, Sylvia, Tessa said, placing her hand on Dane's arm, that your mail situation is vulnerable. This old-fashioned box on the porch. Anyone could just take things. We recommend, Dane picked up smoothly, transferring all your essential correspondence to a new, secure P.O. box, a digital physical hybrid service. We can set it up to auto-forward all your financial and county records, just to keep them safe. They presented me with a form. I read it. It gave them permission to redirect my mail. It sounds very modern, I said, folding the paper and setting it on the table next to my knitting. I'll certainly think about it. I did not sign it, but I did keep my old P.O. box, the one I had held for 30 years. The small, strange things began to arrive, the grains of sand in the gears. First, a confirmation letter from the post office, thanking me for my change of address request. Not for the secure box they wanted, but a request to forward all mail from my Linden Street address to a new address I did not recognize. I went to the post office immediately, the small brick building downtown. I showed them my driver's license. I informed them the request was fraudulent. The clerk cancelled it, stamping a form with unnecessary force. Second, an invoice arrived in the mail. It was from Apex Renovation Assessments, a company I had never heard of. The charge was for $800 for a structural integrity and refinance evaluation. The date of service was listed as October 20th. I was at my doctor's appointment all day on October 20th. I called the number on the invoice. "Ma'am," the receptionist said, "that invoice has already been handled. It was authorized and paid for by the client's representative." "Who?" I asked, my voice very calm. Was the representative? A pause. The clicking of keys. That would be a Tessa Corbin. I hung up the phone. That evening, my neighbor, Ruth Delgado, stopped me while I was taking out the recycling. Ruth has lived next door for 40 years and sees everything. "Sylvia," she said, "I'm glad you're getting that new roof. But why on earth did they send the inspector when you weren't home?" I stopped, the plastic bin halfway to the curb. "What inspector?" "Ruth. Last week, Tuesday. You were at your checkup." "I know. Because I saw you leave. About an hour later, a woman in a sharp blue blazer got out of a black car. She had short, dark hair. She walked right up and used a key on your front door." Tessa, who had never once been given a key. That night, I waited until the house was dark and the street was quiet. I went to the old steel safe hidden behind the watercolor of the coast in David's study. I spun the combination David's birthday, our anniversary, the year we moved in. The heavy door swung open. Everything looked fine. My will, the insurance policies, the original grant deed, all in their protective sleeves. But I checked again. I counted the documents. My will, the policies, the deed, and the envelope that held the certified, notarized copy of the deed, the one I kept separate, just in case of fire, was empty. The copy was gone. The last piece fell into place on Friday. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was slick, breezy, and utterly cold. "Hi, this is Tori calling from Ames and Pike Realty. I'm just following up on the listing for Linden Street. We're very excited, but we really need to get the interior photos done. Can you confirm if the tenant will be out by the 1st? Just give me a call back." I played the message 3 times. Listing. Tenant. That word Tessa had used, free, was not a joke. It was not an insult. It was a business term. It was the overture to a meticulous, carefully orchestrated plan. And they thought I was too old, too slow, and too grateful to notice. The voicemail from Tori Ames was not a grain of sand. It was a boulder dropped into the machinery. I saved the recording and immediately called Abram Keller. Abram has a small practice on Main Street, above the bakery. He handled David's will, and he is not a man who tolerates nonsense. His office is cluttered with binders, not expensive art. Sylvia, he said, pushing his glasses up his nose as I sat down. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm seeing a crime, I replied. I laid it all out on his desk, the invoice from Apex Renovation Assessments, my written notes from Ruth Delgado's sighting, the date of my doctor's appointment, the empty envelope from my safe, the fraudulent change of address form. Finally, I played the voicemail from Ames and Pike Realty. Abram did not interrupt. He just listened, his expression hardening. When the voicemail finished, he was silent for a long moment. Tessa, he said. It was not a question. And Marcus, I said. He's letting her. Letting her is the same as doing it. He turned to his computer. You're not living free, Sylvia. You're being evicted. Illegally. He typed. The sound of his keyboard was the only noise in the room. Sharp, angry clicks. They can't list a house without authorization. They can't get an assessment without an application. And they can't do any of it without your signature. They have a key, I said. Ruth saw her. A key is just trespassing. What I'm looking for. Ah. He stopped. He leaned closer to his screen. Here we are. He turned the monitor toward me. An electronic power of attorney, he said, his voice flat and cold. Filed with the county registrar 3 weeks ago. It grants Marcus full authority over all your assets, specifically citing real property transactions. My breath caught. I was looking at my own name, Sylvia Corbin, digitized and filed. I never signed that. I have never seen that document in my life. I know, Abram said. He pointed. It was notarized. The notary's name was Brandy Lowe, listed as a mobile notary public, and attached to the filing was a scanned image of the signature page. My signature. Except it was not. Look at this, I said, my finger tracing the screen. Look at my name. Abram leaned in. The Y, I said. In Sylvia. I always loop the tail back to the left. A small flourish. David used to say it looked like a backward E. This just stops. It's a lazy I. It's not mine. It's good enough to pass a quick glance, Abram said, his jaw tight. But it's a forgery, and it's the key to their entire plan. The phone on his desk rang. His assistant buzzed him. Mr. Keller. It's a Mr. Pike from the bank, calling for Sylvia Corbin. He says it's urgent, regarding the refinance application for Linden Street. I looked at Abram. He nodded, his eyes like ice. He put the call on speaker. Mrs. Corbin. This is Owen Pike at the bank. We just received the appraisal report for your property, the one filed with your son's application. It's a great valuation, but we just need you to confirm your social security number to finalize the loan. I couldn't speak. Abram did. Mr. Pike, this is Abram Keller, Mrs. Corbin's legal counsel. There is no refinance application. Mrs. Corbin is the victim of financial fraud, and your bank is now involved. Do not process that loan. There was a sharp inhalation, then a stammered apology. Abram hung up on him. The assessment invoice, he said, tapping the paper I'd brought. They needed the appraisal for the loan they were putting in Marcus's name, secured by my house. He was typing again. Ames and Pike Realty. Here's the listing. Pre-market. Private viewings only. Tory Ames. They've already taken exterior photos. He printed the page. It showed my home, my porch, my rose bushes, with the words, "Coming soon," plastered over them. "I'm calling the notary," I said. Before Abram could object, I had my phone out and was dialing the number for Brandy Lowe, mobile notary. I put it on speaker. A cheerful, high-pitched voice answered. "Brandy's notary service. We come to you." "Hello, Brandy," I said. My voice was low and calm. "My name is Sylvia Corbin. You notarized a power of attorney for me 3 weeks ago. I am looking at the document now, and I need you to describe the identification I used." The silence on the line was instant and total. Brandy stammered. "Ma'am, I do a lot of those. I'd have to check my book." "Check it," I said, "because I will be filing a formal complaint with the Secretary of State by 5 o'clock today. I have never met you, Brandy. I was not there. So I want you to tell me, right now, who you notarized." "Oh, God," she whispered. The cheerful voice was gone. It was a mobile service, at a coffee shop. The woman, she seemed so nice. Her son was with her. She said she was you. She said her ID was in the car, but she had a copy. And I was in a hurry. I didn't look close enough at the photo." "You did not verify the ID?" Abram cut in, his voice like a judge's gavel. "You are aware that is a felony." Brandy started to cry. "You will meet me at my office in 1 hour with your notary log," Abram commanded. "And you will sign an affidavit, or I will have the sheriff pick you up. Do you understand?" She whimpered a yes and hung up. I turned to Abram. "So, what now?" He was already on the phone with the county clerk. "I need an immediate title freeze on 455 Linden Street. Yes. Fraud. Forged power of attorney. I'm sending the affidavit from the notary who confessed." He hung up. That stops them from selling or getting the loan. For now. He grabbed a legal pad. "I'm filing the complaint. I'm filing for a temporary restraining order. I'm calling the police financial crimes unit." I stood up. I took the USB drive from my purse, the one containing photos of all the documents, the audio file of the realtor, the picture of the forged Y. I had made copies before I ever left my house. "You do that?" I said, putting the USB on his desk. "I'm going to the Haviland County Recorder's office. I'm filing a transfer dispute in person. I want them to see my face. I want them to see the real Sylvia Corbin." Filing the dispute at the recorder's office was like planting a flag. It was a formal declaration: I am here. I am lucid. And this is mine. But the true battle, I knew, would be fought with the details, with the small, ugly facts they had tried to bury. Abram Keller began to dig. He was no longer just my small-town lawyer. He was a bloodhound. And the digital trail they left was wide and deep. He gained access to the communications between the realtor, the bank, and his clients. The first email he showed me was from Tessa to Tori Ames, the realtor. It was marked urgent. "We need to close quickly," Tessa had written. "The current occupant is sentimental. We need to finalize the listing before she changes her mind." I wasn't an occupant. I was the owner. And sentimental was her word for alive. Then came the text message from my son, Marcus, to the appraiser, the one from Apex Assessments. The appraiser had apparently asked about scheduling. Marcus's reply was one sentence: "Access anytime. House is unoccupied. Unoccupied, Abram said, his voice dripping with acid. And yet, here is the timestamp from your doorbell camera on that exact day. He pointed to the log on my phone, the one that showed me leaving at 9:02 in the morning for my doctor's visit, and returning at 3:14 in the afternoon. Unoccupied. The lies piled up. They were not just trying to steal the house, they were trying to erase me from it. But Tessa's greed had made her sloppy in other ways. Abram, acting on a hunch, had pulled the utility records for the property. The electricity usage on the detached storage shed, David's old workshop, had tripled in the last 6 months. She's running a business out of it, I said. It wasn't a question. It took Abram half a day to find it an online storefront selling imported home goods. The shipping and returns address was not listed, but a photo on their social media page showed a woman loading boxes into a van. The license plate was blurred, but not well enough. Abram's paralegal managed to enhance the image, tracing the partial plate and the vehicle type to a rental agreement. The address on the rental: my storage shed. She's been subletting your property, Sylvia, Abram said, while simultaneously claiming it's empty. Then, a darker piece of the puzzle. Among the stack of invoices Tessa had authorized for improvements, the ones used to justify the appraisal value, was one from a locksmith. It was not for new locks. The itemized line, marked urgent, was for lock removal and override, front and side doors. She was going to have the locks drilled, I whispered. The confirmation came, once again, from Ruth Delgado. My neighbor brought over her tablet, her face pale. Sylvia, I didn't think anything of it at the time, she said. But I was recording the Blue Jay at my feeder, and I caught this. She played the short clip. It showed my front porch. It showed Tessa, in her sharp blazer, jamming a key into my front door. It did not work. She then walked to the large terracotta pot where David and I used to keep a spare key, decades ago. She crouched, dug underneath it, and pulled out an old, tarnished key. She tried that one, too. It also failed. She stood up, visibly frustrated, and kicked the pot before storming off. That same afternoon, I had my locksmith at the house. He replaced every lock, every cylinder. He added new, heavy-gauge deadbolts, the kind with a keyhole on the inside as well as the out. When he was finished, I went to David's study and installed 2 small, high-definition cameras. One faced the living room, the other faced the front door. My next call was not to Abram. It was to the Briarford police. I asked for the Financial Crimes Unit. I was put through to an officer, Naomi Cortez. I told her I was a 62-year-old widow. I told her I was the victim of elder financial abuse. I told her I had the proof. I will be at your house in 20 minutes. Mrs. Corbin, Officer Cortez said. Her voice was all business, and for the first time in a month, I felt a different kind of authority in the room. That evening, I was back in Abram Keller's office. He had the affidavits. He had the emails, the texts, the photos of the van, the locksmith's invoice, and Ruth's video file. We have them, Sylvia, on criminal charges and civil fraud, he said. Now we just need to protect the asset, permanently. The best move is to place the house in the Corbin Home Trust, with your granddaughter Lila as the successor trustee. It makes it untouchable. He looked tired. He rubbed his eyes, then turned to his massive filing cabinet. We set up your will, so we must have started a file for... Yes, Here. Corbin, David and Sylvia. Estate planning. He pulled a thick, dusty binder and put it on his desk. He opened it. The pages were old. The type was from a different era of printer. He flipped past the will, past the healthcare directives. He stopped. He just stared at the page. Abram. I asked. He looked up at me, a strange, slow smile spreading across his face. It was the smile of a man who had just found the murder weapon in his own coat pocket. Well, damn, he said, and he started to laugh. He turned the binder around. Siliv? They were never going to get this house. I looked at the page. It was a declaration of trust. You and David, he said, tapping the paper. You did this 7 years ago, right after his first diagnosis. You put the house into the Corbin Home Trust. I looked at the date. I looked at our signatures. Real and true. I remembered. We were so afraid of medical debt, of the hospital coming for the house. It never left the trust, Abram said, his voice bright with victory. It was never in your individual name to be transferred. That fraudulent power of attorney, it's worthless. The refinance application void. The listing illegal. They are trying to steal something that you do not, technically, even own. The trust does. And they can't touch the trust. The discovery of the Corbin Home Trust changed everything. The immediate, suffocating panic, the feeling of the floor giving way was gone. In its place, a cold, clear anger settled in. Abram had stopped the sale, but he had not stopped the betrayal, the forgery, the lies, the assumption that I was so old and so sentimental that I would simply vanish from my own life. Those were the true crimes. So, they're beaten, I said to Abram, my hands folded on his desk. Legally, on the house. Yes, he said, but they don't know it yet. And the fraud, Sylvia, the attempted theft, the conspiracy, the elder abuse, that is very, very real. Good, I said. That's what I want to focus on. I went home and made a call. Not to Marcus. I called my granddaughter, Lila. Lila is my other son's daughter. She is 23, a library apprentice, and has a mind like a steel trap. Quiet and precise. She lives 2 towns over. She arrived that evening with a laptop and a thermos of black coffee. Hi, Grandma, she said, giving me a hug. You sounded focused. I sat her down in the kitchen, the same kitchen where Tessa had spat her insult. I laid out every piece of paper. I played the recordings. Lila did not interrupt. She just listened, her eyes getting darker and sharper. When I was finished, she opened her laptop. Okay, she said. Let's build the timeline. For the next 2 days, my kitchen became a war room. Lila, the quiet librarian, transformed into a forensic investigator. She created a spreadsheet, a precise, color-coded timeline that was, in itself, a work of art. August 14th, she'd murmur. Fake change of address form filed. August 20th. Marcus at the house. Organizing files. August 21st. Fake POA notarized by Brandy Lowe. September 3rd. Tessa brings Dane Calder. September 10th. Apex appraisal. Authorized by Tessa. September 12th. Marcus texts appraiser. House is unoccupied. September 15th. Tori Ames voicemail. Listing. September 16th. Owen Pike call. Refinance. She cross-referenced everything my phone records, Ruth's video, the doorbell camera logs. She created a narrative so tight, so irrefutable, that it left no room for doubt. "This is the first layer," Lila said, backing up the file. She created a triple-layer cloud backup, encrypted, and then copied everything to a fresh USB drive. "Where's the hard copy going?" "Northwick Civic Outreach," I said. I had volunteered there for 15 years. I still have a small safe deposit box in their archives. No one knows about it but me. While Lila built the case, Abram Keller tore down their facade. He drafted a formal notice of invalidity, citing the pre-existing trust. He sent it not only to Marcus and Tessa's lawyer, but, more importantly, to the bank, the land office, and Ames and Pike Realty. He attached the forged signature, my real signature, and the affidavit from the crying notary, Brandy Lowe. "We are closing every door," he told me on the phone. "The bank has already frozen Pike's file, pending their own internal fraud investigation." Officer Naomi Cortez received her own copy of the files. She called me after listening to the voicemail from Tori Ames, the realtor. "Mrs. Corbin," she said. The tone of that call, combined with the other evidence. She's not just a realtor. She's a potential witness, or an unindicted co-conspirator. That message shows clear intent to defraud based on your son's false statements. We are taking this very seriously. That night, alone in the quiet house, I sat at David's desk. I took out a fresh legal pad. I was not writing a will or a complaint. I was writing a speech. It was not a speech to beg, or to cry, or to ask why. It was a speech to define what had happened. It was a speech about rights, about boundaries, and about the redefinition of a family. I realized that legal papers and police reports were not enough. I would not let this be handled by proxies in courtrooms months from now. I needed to see their faces when they realized the game was over. The next morning, I called Lila. "I have an idea," I said. "It's time for a family dinner." "Grandma?" she said, her voice wary. "Are you sure?" "Oh, yes," I said. "And we're having guests." I made the calls myself. First, to Marcus and Tessa. "We need to talk," I said, my voice warm, conciliatory. "About the house. I think you're right. It's time to plan. Please, come for dinner. Thursday, 7:15. They agreed. Too quickly. I could hear the relief, the victory, in Tessa's voice. My second call was to Tori Ames, the realtor. "Ms. Ames," I said. "My son has been handling the details, but I believe there's been some confusion about the property value. I'm having a small meeting with my loan officer to compare figures, and I'd be grateful if you could join us, just to ensure we're all on the same page. Thursday, 7:15. She, too, agreed, eager to secure her commission. My third call was to Owen Pike, the banker. I used the same story. He was falling over himself to clarify the refinance application he had almost approved. Abram, meanwhile, had scheduled one last piece of mail, a formal, certified letter from the Haviland County Recorder's Office confirming the notice of transaction freeze on 455 Linden Street. He had it timed to be delivered by courier on Thursday, in the evening, on Thursday afternoon. I set the table. I used the good china. I made chicken soup. And on the sideboard, on my mother's silver tray, I placed the old, heavy skeleton key that had once opened the original front door, long before David and I had rebuilt it. It was a prop. It was a symbol. And it was a warning. The afternoon was still. Too still. Around 3. A black sedan I recognized from Ruth's video footage cruised past my house. It slowed, stopped 20 yards up the street, and I saw a phone pointed out the driver's window. Tori Ames, the realtor, getting her last-minute shots of the facade. I was standing in the living room, near the window. I did not move. I did not drop the curtain. I let her see me. I stared straight at the car until it peeled away from the curb. My phone buzzed. An email from Tessa. The subject line was just, "Tonight." How informal. "I'm so looking forward to clearing the air," she wrote. "Let's just be gentle tonight. Mother. It's all just family business." The message was dripping with false reassurance, but I could smell the fear underneath it. My conciliatory tone on the phone had worked. She thought I was finally broken and ready to be managed, and she was desperate to close the deal. Lila arrived at 5, using the back door as I'd asked, carrying her college backpack. She was quiet, focused. While I stirred the chicken soup, she moved through the dining room. She checked the 2 hidden cameras, confirming their angles were perfect. Then, she took a small, black object from her bag and tucked it deep into the dried flower arrangement in the center of the table. "Mike is hot," she whispered, showing me the audio levels on her phone. "Live streaming to the cloud. They can't delete what they don't know exists." My phone vibrated again. A text from Abram Keller. "It's done. The judge signed the temporary restraining order. All assets are frozen, pending the hearing. A process server is on standby. Give me the word, and he'll serve them on your porch." I texted back, "Not yet. Let them in first." A minute later, another text, this time from Officer Cortez. "Mrs. Corbin, I just interviewed Brandy Lowe. She has signed a full cooperation agreement in exchange for a lesser charge. She's listed all of her mobile appointments. She's terrified, and she's ready to testify against Tessa." The legal and criminal pincers were in place. I went to the dining table. I set out the simple white soup bowls. I sliced a loaf of fresh bread. It was a normal meal, a normal dinner, I thought to myself, for a profoundly abnormal night. Then I went to the sideboard and placed 3 large, clearly labelled file folders. The first read, "The Truth." The second, "The Forgeries." The third, "What I Owe and What You Don't." At 7:01, my phone chimed. A text from Marcus. "Awful traffic. Mother? We're going to be running a little late. Maybe start without us." It was a stall. A classic Marcus maneuver. He was trying to regain control of the schedule, to make me wait, to make me anxious. I typed my reply. My fingers were perfectly steady. "The door locks from the inside at 7:15. I hit send. The silence in the house was absolute, broken only by the heavy tick-tock of the regulator clock. I watched the minute hand. 7:10. Lila was in the kitchen, her face illuminated by her laptop screen, monitoring the feeds. 7:12. I straightened the silver key on its tray. 7:13. The soup simmered. The house waited. The hand clicked to 7:14, and as if summoned by the clock, I heard it. The crunch of expensive tires on my gravel drive. 2 car doors slamming in quick succession. The sound of sharp heels on my wooden porch steps. A cloud of cold, familiar perfume. And then, the sound that had started it all. Tessa's short, confident laugh. I opened the door at 7:14, precisely. They stood on my porch. A strange, toxic tableau. Marcus, looking uncomfortable in a suit jacket he never wore. Tessa, smiling her bright, false smile, her perfume hitting me first, and behind them, two strangers who looked like they were here to close a deal, a woman with a shark-like smile and a briefcase, and a man who looked nervous and over-eager, clutching a leather portfolio. "Mother," Marcus said, his voice strained. "This is Tory Ames, from Ames and Pike Realty, and this is Owen Pike, from the bank. We, invited them to help with the planning." "How efficient," I said. My voice was calm, even. "Please, come in." As they stepped into the hall, my neighbor Ruth Delgado emerged from the kitchen, a teacup in her hand. "Good evening," she said, her voice perfectly mild. Tessa's smile faltered. Her eyes darted from Ruth to me. "Ruth, what are you doing here?" "Sylvia invited me," Ruth said, bypassing them and settling into the armchair in the corner of the dining room. "As a witness." "A witness for what?" Tessa snapped. The polite veneer was already cracking. "For the planning," I said, gesturing to the table. "This way." I led them into the dining room. The soup was in the tureen, the fresh bread was on the board, and the three large file folders sat like judges at the head of the table. "Oh, what a cozy home," Tory Ames said, her eyes scanning the ceiling beams, the wide plank floors, the original mouldings. She was not admiring, she was appraising. "Yes," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "It is. It's mine." Tessa shot me a look, a mix of annoyance and warning. Owen Pike sat down, nervously tapping his portfolio. Marcus and Tessa took their seats opposite me. Lila was already at the end of the table, her laptop open but the screen dark. We began the charade. I served the soup. They talked. "Mother?" Marcus began, just as I knew he would. "We've been looking at some very smart financial options. Owen, here, has found a fantastic way to use the equity in the house to, provide liquidity for your future." Owen Pike, on cue, leaped in. He opened his portfolio. "Absolutely, Mrs. Corbin. The valuation came in very strong. Based on that, we can offer a reverse mortgage or a standard refinance at a fantastic rate. We're talking access to over 60% of the home's value, cash in hand. These are beautiful numbers." He slid a glossy brochure across the polished wood. I did not look at it. Instead, I turned my gaze to Tory Ames. "You did the valuation, I assume?" "My firm approved it. Yes," she said, her professional smile firmly in place. "We're very confident in the market. This neighborhood is in high demand." "You must be," I said. "You were so confident. You took the exterior photos yourself." "When was that?" "This afternoon." Tori's smile froze. Her hand, which was reaching for her water glass, stopped mid-air. I'm not sure what you mean." "I do," Lila said, her voice cutting in for the first time. She turned her laptop screen around. On it, a crystal-clear photograph of Tori's black sedan parked 20 yards up the street, and in the corner of the screen, the digital file information. The metadata from the photo, time-stamped at 3:02 p.m. today, and the doorbell camera log, which shows you driving by 3 times. You seemed to be in a hurry. Tory Ames turned a pale, chalky shade of grey. Tessa slammed her spoon onto the table, the clatter echoing in the silence. "What is this? This is absurd. Mother, you don't understand finance. You don't understand how these things work. We are trying to help you." "Help," I said. The word was flat. I placed my hand on the first folder, the one labeled The Truth. You're right, Tessa. Let's talk about what I do understand. I opened the folder and slid the first document across the table. I understand this. This is the Corbin Home Trust. Signed by me and my husband 7 years ago, with Abram Keller. I slid out the next page. And this is the addendum, the schedule of assets. The only asset in the trust is this house, 455 Linden Street. I let them read it. Owen Pike's eyes went wide. Tori Ames looked as if she was going to be sick. Marcus just stared at the paper, his face blank with disbelief. And here, I said, tapping the last page with my finger, is the list of trustees. I am the sole trustee, and the successor trustee, upon my death or incapacitation, is my granddaughter, Lila. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the regulator clock seemed to hold its breath. And into that silence, I reached down to the side of the front door, just behind my chair. My hand found the small, solid metal knob of the new deadbolt, the one installed on the inside. I turned it. The sound was not loud, but in the stillness, it was as definitive as a gunshot. A heavy, metallic click as the bolt slid home. Every head at the table snapped up, their eyes, all of them, fixed on me. Sylvia, Tessa said, her voice a low, dangerous hiss. What are you doing? It is time to listen, I said, my voice calm and low. It is no longer time to talk. Marcus tried to force a laugh. It came out as a strangled bark. Mother? What is this? What's the lock for that's crazy. I'm locking the door, I said, looking him directly in the eye. To keep the truth in? This is ridiculous, Tessa said, pushing her chair back and starting to rise. Sit down, Lila said. She didn't raise her voice, but Tessa froze. Lila pressed a key on her laptop. A voice filled the room, amplified by a small speaker hidden in the flower arrangement. It was my son's voice, smooth and reassuring. Access any time. House is unoccupied. Marcus's face went white. Lila pressed another key. Now it was Tessa's voice, crisp and annoyed, clearly on a phone call. I don't care about the frame. Just remove the locks. I have a contractor who needs to get in for measurements. Yes, an urgent removal. Bill it to the estate account. Tori Ames and Owen Pike both recoiled, as if the audio were a physical thing that had struck them. They were no longer at a business meeting. They were at the scene of the crime. The audio of Tessa's voice ordering the lock removal hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Marcus was staring at the speaker in the flowers, his mouth open. And then, I said, my voice cutting through their shock, there is this. I reached for the second folder, the one marked The Forgeries. I slid a single, crisp document, heavy with official letterhead, to the center of the table. This arrived by courier an hour ago. It is a certified copy of a notice of transaction freeze from the Haviland County Recorder's Office. It states that all transactions, sales, liens, or refinancing related to this property are temporarily null and void, pending a criminal investigation into a fraudulent power of attorney. Tori Ames and Owen Pike both flinched, as if I had thrown something. A forged POA, I continued, based on a notarization done without a valid ID, which leads to this. Lila's laptop chimed. A video call request? She accepted it and turned the screen. Abram Keller's face filled the monitor, his office dark behind him. He was not smiling. Good evening, all. Abram said, his voice tinny and loud in the quiet room. I trust you're enjoying the soup. I'm calling to inform you that as of 6:20 p.m., a Haviland County judge has signed an emergency restraining order against Marcus Corbin and Tessa Lang Corbin, prohibiting any contact with Mrs. Corbin or any transactions involving her assets. A process server is currently en route to your location. Do not leave the premises. Tessa made a sound, a low gasp of fury. And, I said, holding up my own phone, which had just vibrated. A text message from Officer Naomi Cortez of the Briarford Financial Crimes Unit. She sends her regards. It seems the notary, a Ms. Brandy Lowe, has just signed a full affidavit detailing her confession. She confirms she never verified an ID, that she was pressured by Tessa, and that she is now a cooperating witness for the state. Officer Cortez has what she needs. This is now a criminal matter. That was the breaking point. I'm out, Tori Ames said, her voice shaking. She grabbed her briefcase, her chair scraping horribly on the wood floor. I was told this was an unoccupied estate property. I was told the owner was in agreement. This is a dirty deal. I'm withdrawing the listing, effective immediately. My agency will cooperate fully with any investigation. You will hear from our lawyers. She backed away from the table as if it were on fire. Wait, Tessa shouted, but Tori was already fumbling with the deadbolt. Don't bother, I said. It only opens from my side. Owen Pike looked like he was going to throw up. He was pale green. Misrepresentation of residency, he stammered, shoving his glossy brochures back into his portfolio. My risk department. My job. This file is toxic. It's dead. The bank will be filing a full report on this. This is mortgage fraud. He, too, shrank back from the table, joining Tori in a terrified huddle by the locked door. All the manufactured charm, all the feigned concern, was gone. Tessa's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. She rose from her chair, her eyes burning into mine. You did this, she shrieked. You stubborn old woman after all we did for you. You live here for free. We were just trying to make the house work, and you've ruined everything. No, I said. My voice was low, and it silenced her. I have never lived here for free. I paid for this house with my life, with my work, and with my husband's, and no one. I looked first at Tessa, then at my son. No one works on my name. Marcus finally broke. The mask of the dutiful, henpecked son dissolved, revealing the weak, grasping man underneath. Tessa, this was you, he accused, his voice rising in panic. This was all your idea, the POA, the notary. I told you it was too fast, Mother. She pushed me. She made me do this. Did she? Lila's voice was quiet, but it sliced through his whining. She pressed another key on her laptop. The screen lit up, showing a text message thread. His name, Marcus, was at the top. She read his words aloud. Lila, you read it. What does it say? Lila looked at her uncle, her face void of expression. It says, I don't care what you have to tell her. We need this. Force her to sign before the end of the week. Just get it done. Marcus crumpled back into his chair as if his strings had been cut. And then Ruth Delgado, who had been silent in her corner, stood up. She held her small purse in her hands. I believe this is also yours. Tessa, she said, her voice full of a neighbour's disappointment. She took out her phone, opened a file, and placed it on the table. It was the video, the clip of Tessa, in her sharp blazer, digging under my flower pot, trying the old key, her face tight with frustration as she failed to get in. Clear as day. Attempted illegal entry. Officer Cortez's voice would later call it. The air in the room was thick, unbreathable. All the exits were locked. The soup was cold. The facts were on the table. Everyone in that room finally, truly understood. Living free was about to become the most expensive lie they had ever told. The video of Tessa at the door played out on Ruth's phone. The silence in the room, filled only by the tiny, tinny sound of the key scraping in the lock. When it finished, Ruth simply put her phone back in her purse. "Now," I said, my voice cutting into the thick, panicked air. "We will discuss the Corbin Home Trust." I looked at my son. "Marcus, you and I have not discussed the trust since your father was alive, so you are clearly unaware of its provisions. The document you saw tonight is just the cover page." I reached into the truth folder again. "You see, a trust has its own internal rules, its own little government, and rule number 1 in Article 3, Section 2, is that this trust cannot be modified, encumbered, or its assets transferred by any external instrument. This means," I said, looking at Owen Pike, "that a power of attorney, especially a fraudulent one, has no legal standing over the trust's property. It is a piece of paper. It is, and always was, completely and utterly useless." Owen Pike slid his chair back further, his face ashen. He was now fully separated from the table. "But this," I said, "is the part that concerns you most. Marcus." I pulled out the last page from the folder. "This is Article 7. It is a no contest clause, with a very specific addition David and I insisted on. It states that any beneficiary of the trust that would be you, Marcus, and your brother, who attempts to seize, transfer, encumber, or otherwise challenge the authority of the trustee, or attempts to gain control of a trust asset through fraudulent means, is, as of that moment, automatically and irrevocably excluded from the trust and all its provisions. The moment you and your wife filed that forged POA, the moment you sent that unoccupied text, you disinherited yourself." Marcus's head snapped up. The fear on his face was replaced by a new, raw, profound horror. This was not about a house anymore. This was about everything. "Mother," he whispered, "you can't." "I didn't," I said. "You did." As if on cue, Lila's laptop chimed with a new email. She did not turn the screen this time. She simply read the subject line. "From Abram Keller to Marcus Corbin, Tessa Lang Corbin, Tori Ames, Owen Pike, and me. It's a final notice of liability." Lila's voice was clear and cold, reading from the screen. "This email serves as formal notification, CCing all involved parties, that any and all prior consents, verbal or written, from Sylvia Corbin are hereby revoked. Any party continuing to act on the basis of the fraudulent documents, including the forged POA, will be subject to the full extent of civil and criminal liability for conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, and financial elder abuse." Tori Ames, who had been frozen by the door, let out a small, strangled sound. She fumbled with her briefcase, pulling out a tablet. I'm submitting the official withdrawal right now. It's done. The listing is cancelled. We're cancelling it." Owen Pike was doing the same, his fingers flying across his own tablet. "The loan application is withdrawn. I'm flagging it. Flagging it for applicant fraud. It's It's done. The file is cancelled. The bank will. We're done. The two of them, the professionals, had just thrown my son and his wife under the bus in unison. 2 doors, slammed and locked. My own phone buzzed on the table. A new text. I read it, then placed the phone down. That was Officer Cortez, I said to the room. She has formally opened a case file for financial elder abuse. She has requested that everyone in this room remain here. She is sending a patrol unit to take our initial statements. Marcus finally looked at me, his eyes hollow. The fight was gone. The panic was gone. There was only a vast, empty ruin. "What do you want, Mother?" he asked. His voice was a rasp. I looked at him. I looked at the son I had raised, the man who had tried to steal my past and my future for a quick loan. "I wanted boundaries," I said. "You crossed them, so now I want consequences." I reached for the third folder, the one marked "What I Owe and What You Don't." I pulled out 2 plain, white envelopes. They were marked, simply, A and B. I slid them to the center of the table, next to the cold tureen of soup. "This is your choice," I said. "Not mine. Envelope A contains a full confession, which you will both sign. It includes an agreement to immediately retract all false statements, a formal apology to me, to Ruth, and to your niece. It also includes an agreement to pay every cent of Abram Keller's legal fees and to repay the cost of the new locks. You sign it, and I will consider asking the district attorney to focus on your wife." "Envelope B," I said, my voice dropping, "is empty. It means I do nothing. I let Officer Cortez's investigation proceed to its natural, criminal conclusion. I let Abram file the civil suit for damages. I let the no contest clause stand. I pursue this to the absolute end." Tessa was staring at the envelopes as if they were bombs. Marcus was looking at his hands, watching the sweat from his palms soak the cuffs of his expensive, unnecessary suit jacket. The room was silent. The choice hung in the air, thick and heavy as lead. I reached for the deadbolt on the door. I did not unlock it. I just turned the key. One single click, back to its starting position. The sound was sharp, metallic, like the first chime of a clock, beginning the countdown to a final judgment. The click of the deadbolt echoed in the room, and as if that sound had summoned it, the old landline phone on the wall, the one I keep for emergencies, began to ring, its shrill, brassy bell cutting through the tension. Everyone jumped. I let it ring twice before I walked over and answered it. "Hello." It was Abram Keller. "Sylvia," he said, his voice crisp. "The process server has just confirmed. He has officially served the restraining order. It is in effect immediately." "Thank you, Abram," I said, and I hung up the phone. As I placed the receiver back in its cradle, my mobile phone, still on the table, lit up with a new text. It was from Officer Cortez. "My patrol unit is on your porch, Mrs. Corbin." I read aloud, my voice clear in the dead quiet room. "They are ready to take initial statements from all parties present and to collect the forged documents as evidence." I turned back to the table. I looked at the 2 cowering professionals by the door, at my granddaughter, standing like a sentinel, and at the 2 people who had broken my family. I walked to the sideboard, and I put my hand on my mother's silver tray, my fingers resting on the heavy, symbolic key. "Tonight," I said, my voice steady and cold. "No one is leaving my house with another lie." I stood at the head of my table, and I began to speak. I read from the timeline Lila had built. On August 14th, a fraudulent change of address was filed. On August 21st, a forged power of attorney was notarized by Brandy Lowe, who has since confessed. On September 12th, my son, Marcus Corbin, texted an appraiser that this house was unoccupied. On September 19th, my daughter-in-law, Tessa Corbin, authorized a locksmith to remove the locks, citing an urgent need. I went on. I named every date, every action, every email, every text. With each sentence, I tapped one of the corresponding documents in the files on my table. It was a litany of their greed, a precise, undeniable catalogue of their betrayal. When I finished, Tessa, who had been vibrating with a silent, contained rage, finally broke. Her shoulders slumped, and she collapsed into her chair, her face in her hands. She made no sound. She was a ruin. Marcus, however, looked up at me, his face a grotesque mask of pleading. "Mother, I only wanted—" Lila's voice cut him off, as sharp and clean as a surgeon's scalpel. "You only wanted to erase your mother from her own home." My son flinched, as if she had struck him. I looked at the two white envelopes in the center of the table. "Envelope A," I said, pushing it an inch forward. "It is your last and only chance to take responsibility, to sign the confession, to pay for what you have done, to show one single shred of decency." The room was a vacuum. Tessa did not move. Marcus just stared at the envelope, paralyzed. The silence was their answer. I walked to the front door. I put my hand on the deadbolt. I turned the key again. A third click, locking it one more turn. The room seemed to grow smaller, the air thinner. They were trapped. And then, from outside, came a new sound. Heavy, measured footsteps on the wooden porch. The sound of boot leather, of authority. The patrol unit had arrived. I watched their faces. Tori and Owen looked terrified. Tessa looked broken. Marcus looked gone. All the arrogant smiles, all the condescending assumptions, all the smug laughter about living free, it was all extinguished, burned out, and gone. I stood by my locked door. The barrier between their lies and my truth. I looked at my son and the woman who had helped him try to destroy me. My voice was low, and it was the last thing I said to them that night. Now, you pay the price. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious. Where in the world are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to connect and hear your own thoughts. Please consider subscribing to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and if you can, support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.